Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming today for Creativity Unleashed, the film XR and AI a revolution. We are very honored that you take time of your day to come and see us, and also a little bit intimidated, to be honest. And we're here to present you how new technology such as XR and AI can really supercharge filmmaking, storytelling, and art without compromising any of its integrity. So nice to meet you. I am Adriana Vecchioli. I am an artist, a filmmaker, an actress, and also an XR designer.
I am Pratik Shah. I am a filmmaker, creative technologist, and I do a lot of random experiments. So we will kind of go over some of those today.
I'm Tahnee Gehm, and I've got a background in traditional 2D animation, and I've made my way into augmented reality, so I consider myself an animagician and an A-artist.
So these are kind of the three main buckets that we're going to be talking about today. The one we're going to spend the most time today is AI, using AI and XR as a layer within your process. But we're also going to quickly go over using AI as a collaborator, and then also the things that are unlocked once you can start using AI and XR as interactive agents.
So starting with AI and
Should we do a little definition of XR and AI? So XR, extended reality, you've got your virtual reality headset, you've got augmented reality that you've tried on your phones for film filters and Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. And AI, artificial intelligence, which is all the hype right now. It's been around for a while, though, and it's ever shifting. It's got tools that help you generate work, but also make your workflow go significantly quicker. And there's so many different tools out there, and we're so excited to share them with you.
So this is kind of the slide you're going to want to take a photo of. These are a lot of the open and closed source tools that are available to you. One of the things that you'll kind of learn as you get into the space is there's this constant push and pull right now between open and closed source. So depending on how you want to use these tools, sometimes the open source method is going to be better because you can customize and train your own models and train LoRa's, which are sidecar add-on models, in order to really hone in your process. But for a lot of things, these services are getting better and better. So you're really going to have to evaluate which one to use when, depending on what you're trying to accomplish and what your process is. So determining your value as a creative technologist and technical artist. One of the biggest reasons I made the transition from traditional filmmaker designer to creative technologist is the rates are way fucking better. I'm sorry, a lot of the things I do on a day-to-day basis are not that different. I'm just adding one or two steps, but all of a sudden, instead of charging a day rate that's based on film rates, I'm charging a day rate based on tech rates. And one of the things I like to do when I'm doing this is we have a ton of free resources to determine what the rates are for AI artists. So if you're freelancing, you should be getting paid better than those those in-house rates. And so it has led to a dramatic change in my financial situation, and we're hoping that this is something that all artists can do.
So first, let's start with treating AI and XR as a new layer, a new in your cake, a new option in your toolbox. There's a lot of conversation in the media about, pitchforks raised about AI replacing us and so on. So I'm a filmmaker, and I found that this is not really the reality of it once you're in the trenches making a movie. AI and XR can really help simplify certain processes, but there's a certain joy in the craft, and so why not try to use the best of both worlds, and rather than picking one or the other, seeking to combine them two and trying to create magic this way. So first, all of these are extremely recognized and well-known directors. So Judd Apatow, Quentin Tarantino, Steven Spielberg, Wes Anderson, PTA, Christopher Nolan, and Rian Johnson. So they've all been like recently really active. And something that all of these directors have in common is they all shoot on film stock, even though they have access to absolutely all the resource they want. So I find it extremely interesting that even though we can emulate the look of celluloid film with various filters on digital, when we look at the masters, when we look at the directors who have access to absolutely everything, they still choose to shoot on film. So I think for me, like, it's really telling, like, to keep an eye on everything, on all the techniques, even the old ones, even those that seems to be forgotten. But still, like, obviously the edit, all the film stock is digitized to be edited digitally, since the process is a lot quicker than splicing the film and gluing it back together. Another example, so like most fantastic characters are usually mocapped, in the Marvel movies and so on. And yet you have like some actors like Stellan Skarsgård in Pirates of the Caribbean on the left, and in Dune in right, prefer to go through like the 8-hour-long makeup process over showing up 5 minutes before the take, because it was very important for his process. So as he was saying, like, painful but worth it to get into character and so on. So there's always something to learn from the different techniques. And so here, these filmmakers have chosen one side over another, and I've been very interested into what happens when you combine the two of them. And there's nothing new about that, because like I'm extremely inspired by films in the 90s that are combining, like virtual digital effects with practical effects. So I think one of the reasons why Who Framed Roger Rabbit became so iconic is because they really managed to weave in and marry animation with live action. So here you see Roger Rabbit, who obviously has been animated on top of the live action footage. But if you look at all the plates, those are real plates. And the plates are following, because the plates are like real objects, they're following the laws of physics of our world. So when they're breaking on Roger Rabbits, they're breaking like real plates, and they're not breaking like carton plates. And so what they did is like to combine, like they showed with people on with green suit that were like erased from the footage in post-production, and then adding all the different like animated character. But I think like it really gives, like, the illusion really works, because like when Jessica Rabbit is seducing the main character, you can see that there's like the weight of the character, her weight on the other character. There's the shadow and so on. She's moving his hat and so on. You can also see in his trench coat all the modifications. And so for me, all these things are really like giving the illusion, whereas when I see a lot of even like mixed reality things, it doesn't feel alive because you don't have the shadow, you don't have the weight, you don't have all those things. And so I like for me to really return to those movies as like inspirations. And so some example, so another example for me that's iconic is The Mask with Jim Carrey. So you have this sequence where he's turning into the mask for the first time. And so when he is in his like, like in his tornado, like Taz, this is of course overlaid, but they had like basically different mechanism before to create the explosion and so on, pushing the furniture around and so on. I wish there would be more of that today in filmmaking, but it's still possible. So I am currently making a movie named Mermaids, and we are in the very, very early stage of pre-production, and I want to show some examples of how I am combining practical with virtual effects and using some of the latest technology. So in my story, Mermaids, there is a character like that. This is a sketch I've done who grows sometimes tentacles. And we'll see a series of prototypes and iteration on the character. So first, so this is something that we've done, that we shot quickly in my grandma's house on an iPhone. And so here I'm just moving the skirt, and there are like tentacles coming out. So the tentacles were modeled on Blender and by my friend and artist Emil Bruce Nilsson. But I wasn't completely sold on the illusion because there was nothing moving the skirt right here except my hand. And I wanted the tentacles to be bigger and so on, but like they would have needed to push the skirt in various ways. So we tried a different way. And so this is without VFX footage that we shot. So all of this, we shot it last week. We're still working on it, so it's like extremely rough and work in progress. But so basically what we did is like we got a plushie toy for a snake that we pinned under the skirt. And on top of the skirt, we have a fish line. And there's two people out of frame that are moving, puppeteering the skirt on cue to make room for the next stage that we are working on right now. And so that's an example of, those are examples of keyframes for the animation that I drew over the footage. And this is like an early prototype while compositing a model on it. But we also use, so this is a prototype for a promo video that we'll release soon. But there is like this sequence that's like in a nightclub where we're currently looking at the movements of the tentacles and so on. But if any of you has been working in filmmaking, you know that the collaborative process can be pretty long. And therefore, it's very difficult sometimes. I'm a very meticulous director. I have a very precise vision, and sometimes I forget that people are not inside my brain. So, when we're talking with the VFX artist, is like, how big are the tentacles? How do they move, and so on, and all of that. And also with like the costume designer, how we do the dress, and so on. So I was looking like, how can we prototype quickly but efficiently to do that? So it's like storyboarding, but on steroids. And so I turned to XR for that. Initially, I was doing things on Unity, but Unity still takes a lot of time. So recently, I started working on a tool named Playbook. And on Playbook, it's basically we prototype a version of the scene, and that way we can like move the various tentacles around, but we can also block our shots that way and try things out, and and it's very cost efficient. And by the way, the idea to block our shots using VR, I got it from Jon Favreau, who's been using it for his last live action movies for Disney, like the Jungle Book and the Lion King. Like he was using HTC Vives to like walk into his virtual scene and see the different like sequence of shots that he was interested in. And so that's a little overview behind the scene of like moving the different elements and so on, and how we can move around and trying out different things. Sadly, I do not have the finished shot to show you yet, because this was literally captured 4 hours ago.
So in my traditional animation background, part of the thing that takes such a long time is the ink and paint stage. It's traditionally called ink and paint, and that's where you take the rough animation, which is what you see here, which to me is like the most fun part, and then you have to go through, you have to clean up all the lines, and then you have to do like a color pass. And this can be a very, very long part of traditional animation filmmaking. And so I just wanted to do a demonstration here showing how this process can be expedited. So here's my animation roughs. And then I took my frames and I ran them into, I trained a model on a tool that's called Runway ML, which we will cover later, and it has so many different tools on it. So one of the things you can do is you can train it on images that you have. Now, what do I mean when I say that I train it? So I have something, I have a whole bunch of images, and I say, I want you to be able to generate things that look like this in the end. You could train it on yourself as a face, you could train it on someone else, you can train it on a style. So this is a style transfer that I did. So I already completed this animation years ago, and I was like, what happens if I train it on the actual original frames and I fed it through? So, of course, you're going to end up with some goofy things like this. This is it trying to interpret some of those rough frames that you just saw, but of course those were very rough, like super sketchy. Some of them were like almost imperceptible. The AI actually does a pretty good job at like understanding what's going on. So, in the end, I went through and I for each frame of rough animation, I got a trained version of it to spit out like on the right side, a version that was AI generated, trained on my own art, looking at my own animated roughs that looked pretty decent. Now, of course, we see that there's a whole bunch of other like messy stuff going on in the scene, but I was able to clean this up in, very simply in After Effects, overlay it into a background, and then this would need more cleanup afterwards. So here is on the top, the cleaned up AI version that was basically generated by Runway ML. And then in the bottom is the original animation. And the original animation is what I took the original frames from, and I trained Runway on those. And that's not the only way to do it. This is like the free way to do this. I'm sorry, it's very cheap. It's like $15 a month. There, of course, if you've got a really good GPU, you could train this at home. There's other options online for training models, but I just wanted to see what's like the easiest way to do this. And so you could see it lays in all of the paint work pretty well. There's some things that had I known this, like I probably wouldn't have had the shadows and the roughs. I would have done things slightly differently, but it gets it most of the way there. And then with a little bit of cleanup in After Effects, I was able to remove all the background noise. And then obviously the eyes in here are looking a little wonky. Eyes are incredibly important in animation, so I would, as an animator or a cleanup artist, very simply just have to go through and animate the eyes on each frame. Y'all, this took 7 hours to make the original. If I just took some of the original frames, if I just trained it on like 10 of them, and if I had something that was like 100 frames long or an entire film, I could do that so much quicker if I was just focusing on the eyes. So this is showing how like this AI can be used to like thinking about like what is it you're trying to achieve in AI? How can you use it to alleviate like one of the biggest stressors or like something that takes a really, really long time? And so second thing I wanted to cover is also on animation techniques, there's a traditional tool or a traditional technique that's called animating sand on glass or painting on glass, and that's where you're going every single frame and you're painting on it and you're shooting it on a down shooter. It's a little bit of an experimental technique. So I wanted to know if AI could be used to do something down these lines. And so this is all the background frames were generated in the technique I'm going to show you next, and then I just had myself on a green screen, very simply, composite everything in After Effects. So I'm showing, if you draw on the left side, it changes what's on the right side. And so you're able to, this is using something called NVIDIA Canvas. You could download it on your computer. I think it only works on Intel machines. I might be incorrect about that. Anyway, so you draw, and then it changes it. So you can very quickly like see instant results. And this is not the only tool that does this, but this is just an example I had. And then you can like go through and change the style after. So it's kind of like a new way of thinking about ink and paint. So what's happening here, I wanted to do, since I've also do like a lot of augmented reality, I was thinking, well, if you've got something, say like a documentary, and you want to have someone that's going to have their makeup done consistently, and you need to shoot them a lot, and you want to like save time and money, you could just make an AR filter that like does the makeup for them. And let's say you had a little bit of VFX in there. Let's say you had like a little halo or some horns or something. You can so quickly just do this in an Instagram filter or Snapchat or TikTok, and then you can run the feed. So this is shot on a DSLR. And I ran that camera feed through my computer using a camera capture card. And then I ran that into OBS Virtual Camera and Split Cam. And then I was able to run all of that feed into my AR software, which in this case was Meta Spark Studio. Meta Spark is what's used to make Instagram filters. And when you use it on a desktop, you get really, really high resolution. So you can take that really high quality version and run a DSLR through it and then you could do a screen recording of it, which is kind of a janky method, but hey, it works. And you can get like a pretty good looking outcome. And so I'd say like if you really finagled it, you can have something that's film ready using this technology. And so you're able to do things much quicker and like more cheaply. You won't have to worry about doing it in post. You know, dare you to ask me about do it in post one more time, I dare you. So do it all in pre, do it live in camera. That's the really exciting thing happening here. Pratik, you also had something to talk about.
So similarly, for the slide below, like what that was is a virtual set. So for a project I was working on a couple of years, Wandzul, we were trying to shoot out content, and we knew eventually like we were going to do CGI on top of the footage. But to actually plan our blocking and everything, what we did is we created a quick Snapchat filter with our virtual set where the objects are going to be, and it was all designed specifically for this like backyard location. And then we could go through the scene with our actors and give them really, really specific direction on what they're supposed to be doing because we had that live preview. And that's stuff that they're doing on like Avatar level films that now with a little bit of know-how, you can do yourself on your cell phone. And it's like, it makes the planning process so much easier when you know exactly where things are supposed to be. Because then you can also, like a big part of CGI is like a lot of times we plan out these grand shots, but there's going to be elements in the foreground or background that are going to be out of focus that you don't realize when you're planning and doing your previs, but once you actually shoot that footage, then you realize like, oh, we didn't need to plan on having these elements that we're like removing or augmenting in like the foreground or background. And it's just a waste of CGI dollars in order to go through that process. So having those quick previews ready to go on your phone for these scenes that are specific to those locations is super, super helpful.
So I also use Snapchat software for that. So I'm an AR designer, and I create filters on their proprietary software, Lens Studio. And you can really prototype at a high level of fidelity with hardware that's already in your pocket. So without purchasing any like new hardware or nothing fancy, you can really prototype a scene and a sequence that's using VFX, and that makes the whole process of collaboration with everyone a lot easier, because also, as we know, as filmmakers, the VFX artists understand what we have in mind, but sometimes we're talking with producers who do not understand that world in any way, but they're still like a very active part of the process, so the more we can quickly prototype those things, the better.
Yeah, the less you ask producers to use their imagination, the better time you're generally going to have.
And it's also it may also save up a lot of money on set by being able to prepare and eliminate certain options and so on, and therefore rent less gear the day of the shoot and other things like this.
I wanted to cover using AI image generation for helping with internal concept art. Now you have to be a little careful with this because if you use AI that's going to be in a place that's going to perhaps end up making it to screen or influencing something that's going to make it to screen, probably don't want to do that because you need to know how the AI was trained unless if you trained it on your own artwork. So just be careful about that. However, Pratik and I worked on a project that was called Pillow. It's a mixed reality experience that's on the Quest. And so one of the things in the pre-planning stages was like I was coming up with like how are our different experiences going to look, because we had 4 different core experiences. And so some of these things it was like, I just have to get the idea out really fast. And so I was like doing the illustration, everything looked fine, but then there were some background elements. It's like, oh man, I don't want to like spend a lot of time painting a popcorn cup. Like I don't need to do that. I could just like quickly image generate that. Like normally instead of like sifting through and making a whole bunch of like looking for stock photos, you could just generate what you need. And it's really, you can't really art direct it because it's trained on everything and it's not going to get what's inside your head. As an art director, I have experienced this, but you could still like get the idea across. So it can be really, really useful to use AI image generation using something like DALL-E 3 or Midjourney to take some bits and pieces and use those for concept art.
So yeah, this is sort of the high quality version of what we were talking about. Like for the creator, what they did that was very unique for like VFX was they didn't plan out their shots. They just went on locations and started shooting people in natural environments. And so they were making the decisions for what characters are going to be human and what are going to be robots in post. They had ILM backing them, so they kind of were able to get away with that. But this is a philosophy that you can apply to your own projects. They were specifically making sure like the characters that were turned into AI and robots were in the center of the frame, and they were trying to go out and shoot as much naturalistic footage as they could, and that definitely added to the world building of that film. This next clip is probably like the BTS footage that has inspired me the most as I've transitioned from like traditional film to creative technology. What they had done for this is they hooked up a regular old iPad with 5 trackers and a controller, and they loaded up their scenes in Unreal Engine so that the director could actually go and plan out their shots and pretend like he was using a regular camera in virtual space, and they were capturing the movement, and then they could go. They were using these same assets and everything to then go over and do cleanup and then apply final lighting and looks and all that. But it allows a level of communication between your director and your VFX team that's just like, we haven't really had access to that before, like the last like 5 to 10 years. So how did we learn all this? A lot of it comes from what I like to call YouTube University. As far as cutting edge tech goes, like it takes a while for this stuff to trickle into curriculums and whatnot. Whereas like a YouTube creator can be like, hey, I figured this thing out and make a video of it much quicker than a university department can. So some of those like SE courses, Prompt Muse, those are like really AI specific. Whereas like Winbush, William Fauché, and like Corridor Digital are more just like general VFX. And like learning all those different things, like I basically was able to give myself like a graduate education in this stuff over the course of like 2 to 3 years by like giving myself the time to play with these tools and just figuring out what questions I was naturally drawn to and like trying to seek answers to those questions. Another really like important resource for me is like the GitHub trending repos and Hugging Face spaces, because that's where like the state of the art is going to be posted first. Before you hear about it on Twitter or in articles or anything, they're usually posted to GitHub and Hugging Face first. And then, yeah, we also, like, there's Google's AI Test Kitchen where they're always putting out like new projects as well. Those subreddits, they're a little bit hit and miss because they have grown to this like level where a lot of lazier artists have now filtered into those communities, but especially like at the very beginning, those were super useful tools for figuring out like how like people are solving problems in real time in these spaces.
I would also say that most of the people I follow on social media are XR creators and filmmakers who post on Twitter or Instagram stories, like their prototypes, their behind the scenes. And basically every time I see something that catches my eye, I try to find who did this, IMDb for films or others, and trying to see if they have like a public social media. And usually they're friends with equally cool and innovative people, and they tend to repost their work. And it's like how I found like a lot of inspiration for the things I do.
Yeah, and a lot of them are like super like responsive. So if you do have questions and you saw like somebody made a cool thing, send them a DM, send them an email. A lot of times these artists will respond to you.
So can VR be used as an artistic medium and then capture it for final output? So again, my background is 2D character animation, and I make animated films, so styles are all over the place. This artwork is all done by one of our friends, Ewan Rose, and so he sculpted these inside an app on Quest that's called Figmin XR. It's fantastic. And these are also recorded directly from the headset. So you can see how the one on the right, it has a little bit of a fantastical touch, but this is something, if you needed to make a fantastical world, you could do this. You could just record it. You could build it inside VR, and then you could re-record it straight into VR. Go to the next. And then this is the second one that's by Kevin Eng. And so he works on the iPad to make his characters. He animates them, I think, in Blender. The one on the left was used, the background was photo scanned. It might have been with Luma or I'm blanking on the other one.
Polycam.
Polycam, thank you. And then on the right side, he's taken his character and he's put it inside of a scene with Figmin, with another character that's made in Figmin. So what I want to point out is that the dragon on the right side has fire coming out of its mouth. This fire is actually interacting with the physical environment because on the Quest 3, there's something that's called relighting. And so the Quest 3 actually does a room mapping, like it understands the physical space. And this is what Adriana was talking about before earlier with like there's an issue with AR where it just like it lands into the scene and it's not really believable. But here it can actually like understand how light and shadow will interact with the scene. So we have like the lighting that's hitting the walls slightly and it's also hitting the other character's face. And this is all recorded straight in a headset. So you could see how doing something like this, this could be used as a shortcut in filmmaking. And this is a project I worked on. This is called Waba. It's on the Apple Vision Pro. It's a little desktop pet friend. But what I was, it only played once, sorry. What I was impressed about it is that the Apple Vision Pro, much like the iPhone, understands the environment that you're in. It does something that takes like what's called an HDRI. It understands the lighting and the shadow of the room that you're in, and then it takes that and it projects it onto your items that are in 3D space around you. And it gives you like shadows, it gives you realistic lighting. The really cool thing about this is it actually integrates it into the scene. It doesn't just feel like, oh, there's like a sticker of 3D that's like moving along in the space. It's like, no, it's actually physically integrated. So you could use this, you can record, you could build something, record it on the Apple Vision Pro, which yes, it's expensive, but maybe it's cheaper than like doing an entire CG production. And then you could probably use, if you needed to have like higher resolution, you could run it through like an AI upscaling tool to give it a little bit more blend.
Yeah. And with like the Presence platform on Quest 3, you can actually start loading in 3D LUTs, like the same ones you would use in DaVinci or one of those programs. So you're getting a real-time preview of your space in the color space that your final film will be in as well. And there's a lot of hints that Apple is going to be doing the same thing soon. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
These are by Brielle Garcia. And so what she's done here is it's like, well, instead of having an entire motion capture, so say that you've got a character that you want to do motion capture on, instead of getting like an entire motion capture studio and renting that out, a way quicker and cheaper and more affordable way that you could do this is you can use Snapchat and run it into Unity. So on the left, we have a recording, or we've got like input. I'm not sure if this was through a webcam or an iPhone, doesn't really make a difference. Snapchat is understanding how the person is moving in space. And it's doing background removal to remove them, and then it's replacing the person with a 3D rig that's designed to map onto them. So instead of like doing a character in post, you could do it by like actually interacting with them in the screen. And then on the right side, this camera data, the 3D camera data that's being made in Snapchat is being run through Unity. Now, the benefit of this is then you have like the way finer controls of actually being able to like light the scene, set everything up, have like higher quality models. You're taking in that data from like the motion that's being captured on a camera. The computer is probably using, or Snapchat is probably using machine learning, AI, in order to understand like exactly what is the body doing, and then get a pretty, like you can get like performances out of that.
Yeah, and like this is the indie version of this technique. Like this is all markerless, but they're using these same techniques on modern Hollywood films too, where they're doing full rigs with like marker tracking. So for Avatar 2, like once again, they use the same technique in Unreal Engine in order to like in the camera feed that the director is shooting with, the characters that were Na'vi would be Na'vi and the characters who are human would be human, and their interactions seem very natural. So you can, once again, like you get a much finer control of how you're blocking your shots, how you're composing things. And it just like, you're starting to see like CGI is getting better because these techniques are filtering into Hollywood productions as well.
I was going to say on that note, like the fact that AI and all of these production techniques are making things easier means that you're actually able to offset all of that time and energy that would go into that production, and you're able to put it into the finesse, the creativity, like really polishing things at the end and bringing out like the artistry in the end.
Yeah. And so this is just an example of another animation technique. So the original image was just a 2D still image, and this was the base image was generated when I was doing some like early experiments with Stable Diffusion 1.4. And then I'm just using my laptop's webcam to actually animate the character and animate the lips, and it's coming up with the mouth movements and all that based purely on that webcam feed. And this is a technique that scales. Like you can use it within game engines, you can use it as a standalone technique, or you can record this footage and then like comp it later in like Premiere or After Effects.
So on the subject of being able to do work for cheaper, there was a studio that, an agency that had been assigned a project that would have cost $200,000 to do a complete branding of this company and also do a photo shoot, set up the photo shoot, and do all of the editing and post. This company decided, or this agency instead decided to do everything using AI. So it was like they did their concepting all in-house. They just had like a whole bunch of artists, and they were able to make the assets that they needed in AI and use their artists to like really finesse how things go, like how to place them and everything, try out things rapidly with the client, and in the end, clean up the product, which, I mean, the AI didn't make everything in the end. Of course, you have like human artists that are like, they've got the good eye, you've got the training of like understanding how light and shadows and composition and compositing works. But anyway, they were able to get something from $200,000 all the way to $15,000. So this is showing how these techniques can really, really help with budget and making your things happen.
So yeah, this is another example of like a marketed technique, but this was done on an indie production scale with a friend of all of ours, Veronica Flint. She happened to have this full Vicon like motion tracking system, and so the advantage of using a marketed system versus a markerless system, even for the indie production scale, is like we're getting camera movements directly into Unreal Engine. We're streaming also like there's some shots as well, like where we have props. So we have, this is a multicam setup, and we have like props that the actor interacts with that are all tracked properly. So then we can drop those assets into the final animation.
Yeah. So I'm an independent filmmaker, and all my film are crowdfunded, so I don't have access to a big movie studio budget, but I have hope. And a problem that I have is all the films I have in mind are like extremely ambitious sci-fi movie, or like I rarely have an idea where it's about two actors in a room having like an argument or something like this. So I've been using a lot, like a lot of these tools to like be able to cheat, replace like an expensive location with something and so on. And so here in this case, I do a lot of like lighting design tests in Unity. So that's a quick clip of like trying out. This is something I did like 3 or 4 years ago. So very like rudimentary on Unity. And I wanted to see how like it's the famed bisexual lighting. Like I was very interested into seeing like the intersection of the blue, the red, and the purple light, and like trying to find the perfect like Xcodes that I wanted. And so I don't have a clip in Unity for that, but this is like an extract of my last film, Coming in Hot. And this scene is inside a car wash that we have completely covered with those lights. And I wanted like a very unique, rich red and gold look. And so I prototyped it in Unity. So that was back in 2021. So at the time, I have to say, I wasn't able on Unity to figure out the perfect look that I wanted. However, when I was talking with my DP and the camera team, we had several ideas, several options. And by being able to prototype in Unity, it enabled us to already eliminate some options. And usually what we would have done is like we would have rented gear for all of the options, and we would have tried on set, so also paying for the location, paying for gear rental that we would not have needed. And so that way we were able to like save up a little bit more money. And so this is extracted from the opening scene of the film, and it starts with this car left in the middle of the desert. So, however, we were shooting at dawn, and however, when we arrive at our original location, we couldn't use it anymore because it was a guerrilla shoot. We didn't have any permit, and there's other people had the same idea as us, and we're already shooting with a massive production with like a lot of trucks and so on. So we had to improvise and so on, and we basically shot very close to the hotel where we were staying, and we used there was like a lot of buildings and so on in the back. So we used generative AI to remove them and replace with like the background instead of hand painting everything. However, so we did this in 2021. You see there's a lot of like poles, electric poles in the background, because the shots are not static. At the time, we were not able, using generative AI, we're not able to like get a good look. We had like a ton of artifacts, and we had to kind of like, we would have had to like manually replace everything. So we decided to let them. And so, well, so that's the trailer of the film, but.
Okay. So as I mentioned previously, Runway ML, machine learning, is a tool online that you could pay $15 a month for to just have it. For some basic credits, you can pay $10 to up even more credits. The credits do last a while. You can get some work done. If you're going to do a feature, you might need more. Anyway, it's really cool because it has all these amazing tools that can totally save you so much time and effort. And it might even, like, if you needed to hire an expert that was like really good at, like, say, cleaning up audio or like going through and like finding the cuts in film, you could just use Runway to figure this out. And I was at a hackathon, MIT Reality Hack, earlier in the year. We made a little video for our project, and then at the end, I needed to have the audio turned very quickly into subtitles. And I was like, does Runway have this? Yeah, Runway's got this. So I was just like able to spit out subtitles like this, and it just goes through and it analyzes everything, and it saved me so much time. And I've heard that other people are doing this too. So if you're a creative and you're like running a social media channel or something, instead of wasting time like writing out all your own captions, you could do that. That's only one example of what it has. You've got image replacement. You've got something that's going to slow down time. You can color replace, like do a LUT color replacement. Oh my gosh, it's blurry. There's so many things that it can do. The green screen.
And then the other thing I was going to say is like most of these filters that Runway is using are based on open source projects. So if you find that like Runway is getting you like 80% of the way there, but it's not quite getting you like 90 to 100%, just look up the open source version of it, and generally that's going to be a little bit further along than Runway, and you can use that instead. But it's great for like ideating, prototyping, like figuring out exactly what you need to use before you start putting in that like development time that gets really expensive.
If you were to do that, would you need to have a really fancy computer and more technical know-how?
A little technical know-how, yes, but in terms of fancy computer, like even if you don't have a fancy computer, you can use services like RunPod, like cloud computing in general. Like Shadow PCs are like the really, really easy way to do it, where you get to like basically like rent out like 4080s and whatnot. And that's a way to like do it on the cheap without having to spend the money on your own GPUs. And then AI is a collaborator. So one of the things, so I'm a very typo-prone writer. Whenever I write scripts and whatnot, like I have a lot of really good friends who I can give my work to for feedback. And a lot of times, the first couple times I do that, most of the feedback is just the typos I had within those scripts. And so what I've done to get more out of my friends is I do an AI pass in between where I'm like asking it to go through and like find obvious typos and errors. And then also it started helping me with script breakdowns, like analyzing characters, like how is the arc of a specific character. It's doing a lot of this work that like you would previously have to hire writing assistants and whatnot, but I don't have the budget for writing assistants, but I do have GPT-4. And so a project I've been working on is Virtual Producer. When I shot my first feature back in 2016, one of the things I ran into is like we had 2 ADs on set, but they were constantly overwhelmed. Like we were an indie scale production. We had around 50 people on max shoot days. And like a lot of times, like for assistant directors, like you're in your work mode, but then you get like random questions that need to be answered super quick. They need to be precise, and they kind of just take you out of whatever you're doing. And so for my next project, I started building Virtual Producer, which is a whole set of agents that'll analyze all the text, documents, as well as like your scripts and whatnot and your breakdowns. And you can query it to get those quick answers. It's not meant to replace any producer or assistant director, but it is meant to make their lives a lot easier. And that's my goal with this project. And then, yeah, using AI after a first draft, like character analysis, script breakdowns, feedback improvement, and then also dialogue and clarity. Like a thing I like to do all the time with my writing is I will, if I'm not quite sure about it, what I'll do is I'll throw it into 11 Labs and hear somebody else's voice reading my words. And that like external feedback often like lets me know exactly where I need to make my edits, and it just really helps you become a better writer and better creative. And then AI as an interactive agent. This is sort of the things that are unlocked for the first time ever. A lot of what we've gone down in the past is like how to augment your existing processes and the work you're doing in mediums that already exist today. But I think you're going to start seeing a lot of these tools cause mediums to shift in ways that we can't entirely predict, but we're going to try to anyways. So one of the things I've been working on is using gaze in order to determine what the viewer is actually seeing. So how many of you, show of hands, have like seen Bandersnatch or like those type of choose your own adventure movies? The thing that's really annoying about Bandersnatch is like the controller. Like if you're not watching it on a laptop and you're watching it on a TV, like selecting what scene to go to next was like, it really took you out of the immersion. I think our eyes are a much more natural way to control that. And we can use a combination of AI and game engines to essentially hide the edits that we're using in order to make sure like the content that somebody is seeing is the version of that film that is the best for them. So people who are younger or older, like young people like love quick cuts, like they really have a hard time with like deep gaze type movies that are using like wider shots, longer takes. Whereas old people, like if something's cut too quickly, all of a sudden like they have a hard time processing what's happening. Like I remember coming out of like the newest Spider-Verse movie it was me, my brother, and my dad. And me and my brother, we loved that movie and we were like over the moon over it. Whereas my dad is like, I have no idea what happened. This all went completely over my head. I know Spider-Man was in it. I don't know much beyond that. And so it's like, it's valid that like the pace of that edit was a little bit faster for him. Like the average shot time has gone down to 3 seconds. And for most films, like there are like tons of shots that are much quicker than that. Whereas like just 10 to 15 years ago, the average shot time was more around 7 seconds. And so there should be a happy medium ground where like you get the best version of that content for you. And then the other thing I've been working on a lot is like adding characters to AI. And this is something like a lot of us in this room with film and like writing backgrounds are just naturally a lot better at than the tech bros. So this exhibit right here that Tahnee modeled for me is a project I did with the Chase Center and the Mr. Rogers Foundation where we modified this old telephone booth so you can pick it up and have a conversation with Mr. Rogers and you can ask him like your thoughts, your feelings, the problems you're going to, and he'll respond in a thoughtful Mr. Rogers-like way. And the thing that really elevated that project to the next level wasn't any of the technical tools we were using. We used the same tool set throughout the process, but it was going through and like being really, really specific about the audio that's going into the model that we had access to. Like actually just taking the unstructured prompts and like rewriting them all as if I am directing an actor playing Mr. Rogers as opposed to like you are inspired by the works of him. And yeah, that project is going to be it's currently at the Chase Center, so if you're in San Francisco, check it out, and it's going to be at TED Expo next month. And then these other two projects are like digital agents that I trained for specific purposes. So the Pirate like originally started out as part of a project that I did for MIT Reality Hack, where we had this like pirate character who's teaching you how to use Arduinos. Well, when I was working on the Mr. Rogers project, I needed to learn Arduino stuff really quickly. So I took a lot of the original voice that I had recorded for that, and I started basically having an agent that I can ask really dumb questions to and not feel dumb about like how to do circuit logic and code and things like that. And then the other project I'm working on right now is basically like it's really useful when you're going and interviewing for different positions or pitching to have an audience to pitch against and to get feedback from that audience. I'm pretty lucky. I have a lot of friends that like in the past that I've been able to do those type of pitch practice and interview practice with. But sometimes you get hit up with something in the middle of the day and you can't always like make time, your friends can't always make the time for that. So what I'm designing is an interview simulator that you can then practice your pitches and your interviews against and get actionable feedback on like both your tone, your gaze, all these different factors to give you feedback to be better once you're doing it for real. So where and when to use these tools? Like a lot of these tools, if you are developing something for the big screen, they're not quite ready to be the final thing you see on the big screen. But if you're doing stuff for television, or especially for like web content, which is like the gluttony that like kind of funds a lot of art, they are pretty well suited for those mediums. And the thing to always remember is like all of this is going to get better, faster, cheaper, and we're seeing it like get better at a rate that really we haven't ever experienced before. And so, yeah, the thing to always keep in mind is like whenever you see something that's like a little bit janky, it's like this is the worst it's going to be. It's going to keep getting better from this point on. And so, like one of the things I really want to stress to artists is play with these tools, experiment with your process, open up to using new tools and things like that, and then make a decision on whether that's going to stay in your process. Don't just see like anti-AI sentiment and like mark off anything that's AI. Like if that's your philosophy, then you should stop using your iPhones. You should stop using Photoshop because those have been using different AI tools for a really long time. You should be making that judgment call for yourself. Only you as an artist can make that decision. You can't have other influencers online make that decision for you. And then, yeah, like in terms of ethics, what I like to use is a data set of myself as a tool that I use to evaluate these different image generation pipelines, because that is the most ethical way to do it. If I'm going to end up doing this stuff for client work and whatnot, the most ethical process is to use myself as an example. And then, like you know yourself, you know your own face really well, so you can start picking out how things are going wrong. So those first two images on the furthest right, those were done in Stable Diffusion 1.4. That was when I was really getting started with training and customizing these models, whereas the middle two were like less than a year later. And I basically I've been able to track the progress of a lot of these stuff using my own face. And then in terms of ethics, it's like there are a lot of situations like where you're dealing with animals, certain stunts, certain dangerous environments where like as these tools get better, they are going to be the more ethical choice because then you are not putting actual lives in danger anymore. And so, yeah, like really, really consider your training source and your data. Like when I prototype, I will do examples, like I said, using myself or using my own artwork. But then for my clients, I make sure that they have the rights to that data source before I accept those bids now. Like the base models, we don't really get a lot of control over. Like I can't control what's going into like the base Stable Diffusion model or the base DALL-E model. But I can control what I'm adding on and what additional parameters and training information I'm providing it to make it better for my specific use cases and purposes.
Oh yeah. No, I wanted to add for ethics. So the three of us have, different opinions and positions on using AI in our work and so on. So for me, for instance, I experimented a lot with Midjourney and like the various like AI image generation softwares. I know it's something that I would never use in some kind of finished product on anything that I would either post online or one of my films, because I don't know who are the artists whose work have been used to generate the image that I created, and we wouldn't know how to compensate them fairly. So for me, like this is something that I used for like drafts and prototypes, internally to. It's a tool to communicate with the collaborators, and also so I was showing before examples of my next film, Mermaids, where there is the girl with the tentacles, and I was talking with producers, and we wanted to do a really quick prototype, and we didn't have the budget to create like nice prosthetics and so on. So, but I also knew that I wanted the performers to have something to interact with and not do it totally virtually. So people were suggesting to simply go to the fishmonger and grab, like frozen octopi and do it. And that wasn't sitting right by me because I just refuse to have any kind of animal labor into any of my film set. And like in this case, like an already dead animal. And so what we did was like just using, various props like, like toys, and then using AI style transfer to make it look like higher fidelity to the finished look.
Yeah, and then this is kind of going back to what I was saying before, is like you should be making the judgment call of how you're using AI within your process based on your own experience. Like evaluate these tools for yourself. Most of them are super, super accessible, even if you're not very like technically savvy. And then like if it still looks jank to you, then don't use it. But like go through that process of deciding for yourself. Because one thing I've learned from doing this stuff like corporate work for the last 2 years is people are putting out the requests for these types of projects. People are adopting these projects, and like teams are changing whether you want to or not. And so if you don't want to be part of that process, like that's fine. Let that be a conscious decision. But if you're somebody at the very beginning of your career, like you are most likely not going to have a huge choice. Like there are some people who still shoot on film for photography nowadays, but like most of the people who could do that as a career were already shooting on films. They're already masters of film by the time digital started coming in. And we're going through a similar transition that's even faster.
Something that's, if you're worried about like, oh, well, am I going to be replaced? Please keep practicing your craft. Like, it's important. Like, having your artistic vision, you're not going to actually be able to replace it. Like, you're not actually going to be replaced by an AI. But it might be really important to instead be like, all right, well, what are the new tools? Should I start learning new tools? Unreal Engine, you've heard us mention that a lot, is a game engine that's basically hyper-realistic. If you're doing like photography or lighting design or something, there's these virtual stages that we covered earlier.
Yeah.
This is like, learn how to use the lighting in that. Start learning how to use cameras. Like, how can you take your traditional style and your traditional methods and do them in a digital way? And this is going to save you, like, you're still going to be like, you're still going to have some work, and if you're using these tools, it can like free up your creativity and save you a lot of time.
Yeah.
We're almost out of time.
And then, yeah, like Pandora's box is open. Like this is kind of just more of what we were already saying, but like it's like start familiarizing yourself and be educated about the opinion that you form. And then, yeah, this is also what we talked about.
Well, thank you so much for staying with us.
Yeah, I think we have some time for questions.
We have so before we start questions. So I am Adriana Vecchioli at Adriana Vec on every social media. So please connect us with us.
Yeah, I'm Pratik Shah. You can find a lot of my work at tikilabs.xyz.
I'm Tahnee Gehm. That's me. All my things. Questions? Yes.
Are any of you guys seem to be all filmmakers / tech artists? If there was a brief, I'm a producer, so thanks for telling me not to have an name. That was very cute. But and I also work in advertising at an agency, and
We have mics over there for questions. Yeah, so that
Would
the
you like
whole
to borrow
audience.
mine in the meantime?
Yeah, why don't you borrow her and then we'll yeah.
So yeah, just quickly. So yes, producer. We don't have imaginations. We just care about the cheapest thing, but the most beautiful thing. So my question to all of you is, to your point of traditional filmmakers and photographers who have roots and creds, long creds, the agencies. I work in advertising at a big agency, and there's a reluctance and a resistance to go for the new school kids, and I always advocate and try to incorporate it, and that's why I attend these things to learn as a producer. But it's very hard to make that case, and so do you guys, are you open to working with said filmmakers and photographers who either they're not learning or they're unwilling to learn? How does a producer partner the folks like yourself who have great understanding in both things, and makes my job easier, because in all honesty I would rather hire someone like you to do the whole thing. It makes my communication very streamlined. I don't have to work with a whole house, so what is the answer to that?
I mean, I can just talk from my own experience. So I have a lot of negative bias. So I love XR because I've been working in that environment for a long time. I'm very inspired. I have, I feel the butterflies when I'm offered an XR tool and so on. But when it comes to AI, I have a lot of personal negative bias. But so what I'll say is like once I am in the process of making a movie, there I love this, and I know what I want to do, and I know where I want things to be done, like with humans, I would say. But there's a lot of grunt work that you can't really predict, and once you're in it and doing it, it just sucks. And so in this moment, like sometimes I think you have to feel that pain for yourself, to being like, okay, maybe it's time to get out of my high horses and try other ways to do it.
Yeah. And then like the other thing is like a lot of those like very established filmmakers that you're talking about, like they don't have to do any of that grunt work anymore. Like they have other people, so they're not like directly feeling that pain. Whereas like when you're on an indie, like when I did my feature, like I learned, like I did crash courses in DaVinci to learn how to color grade myself. I have a terrible ear for audio direction, for sound design, but like I did as many classes and like learned how to do that stuff myself. And that's something that people at the indie scale are constantly having to do. Like whether you're working on like a film project or XR or interactive, like there's a lot of like jumping in and like deciding like, hey, there's a lot of unknown, but I will figure it out. I have confidence in myself to figure it out. And then the other thing I've been doing is like, I've been getting called in to do workshops for certain like scanning studios and whatnot. So it's kind of having a bridge between like the old and the new, and like having like a lot of these workshops are like 50% like this is how you do the thing that you asked me for, and it's like that part is usually pretty easy, but it's like the other 50% is just like what are the possibilities, like what direction is this tech going, and like having that understanding as somebody whose process is already established is really important as well.
And I think the last thing that you would say is that you're always in control. Like you're way more in control than you think. So like I write my scripts and so on. I've tried ChatGPT to write things. I find it useful to write the captions on my social media posts because I don't like to write that. But I do love to write a screenplay. And I think like when I work with someone, they don't ask me use ChatGPT to write something. They're like, do you have a good script? And at the end of the day, that's what we care about. And how whatever my recipe is, or like how I'm cooking in my kitchen, that's my business in some ways. So I think like just reassuring people that they're in control, of the how and the process and the craft, and that reminding that we're on the same team. What we want is to make a good film, to make it with the resources and budget that we have available. So looking at the different ways to stretch things. Sometimes the cheapest way is to do it manually and not use technology and so on.
Yeah, there's absolutely times when it's just like, well, I've got this vision in my head. Like if there was the new hot Wes Anderson and his visual styles, the only way you're going to get that is manually, like by actually doing that. Like it's a stepping stone. It's going to help you, but if you've got a vision, and sometimes it's faster to just do it manually. It's like, I'm an expert in this, I can do this, I can illustrate this. Like, I only used it a few times doing concept art, but otherwise it was like, I can paint this, like, not a problem. So, yeah, you're in control.
I hope it answered your question. I think we have a line of question.
Hi. So there's an incredible amount of criticism and social stigma around using AI as a filmmaker. How did you overcome those concerns yourself, and what industry-wide or grassroots changes do you think need to happen to get those who are resistant on board with, using this to elevate their craft?
So I would say filmmaking is an incredible, difficult profession to begin with. It's just the state of things today. And I think also just being an artist is difficult because it's incredibly vulnerable. The thing that you create comes from your heart, and if you're an actor, you're front and center in the final product. So people are actually criticizing you, and that's awful. So I think what I've really learned is this kind of resistance that you're talking about is just one other aspect, and I've learned that whatever I do, even if I create like a nice, happy movie, feel-good movie, there will always be people that criticize and dislike it and so on. And so what I remember is like I do my films for the 5% of cult fanatics, and not the maybe, you know, like the thing is what we need to remember is like nobody's forced to watch a film or anything. We can always change the channel, and something that's really important for me is to like remember that, respect everyone's freedom, and also remembering that there's a bunch of weirdos in the world that love what I'm doing, and I do that for them.
I wanted to add on, like, AI is just another tool. Like, when the calculator came out, we still have mathematicians. They're still doing the really, really hard work. When the camera came out, we still have fine painters, like myself. It's these things are just new tools. They're going to get integrated, yes, but it's going to make work a lot easier for some people. And yes, there's a lot of pitchforks out right now, but it's like, you have to realize, I mean, as I showed in the runway slide, like there's so many tools that this actually genuinely helps out. This saves so much time. There's so many like AI things that are helpful. So if you are like trying to convince someone like, hey, like there's benefits to AI, there totally are. I think there's this whole facade or like this thing in the front, which, unethical AI scraping, like scraping from artists, not cool. They had to get somewhere. I mean, it started. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I don't fully understand how these models work, that they have to have like an insane amount of images to start with for the technology to even work with. So, in a way, it's like, well, you still have calculators, you still have cameras and fine painters. Like it's a little messy right now ethically, but, if you make efforts to do it in a way that's, as considerate as possible to everyone that could have possibly been involved, or that you're training things on your own work, which is like what I really, really care about. It's it's still a what if for me. My opinion on this changes daily, but yeah, I think it's just another tool. So yeah.
Hi. Sorry. I teach video production, and so my question is coming from that perspective. Everyone that I'm hearing here and everywhere talking about AI and how helpful it is, which it is, and I agree with that, they already have knowledge of their domain. They already understand lighting. They've already been through the pre-AI era to build knowledge. I'm teaching folks that are growing up with it as professionals. They're entering their world with already the AI in place. And what I'm struggling with is the balance of how much of the craft, the more analog, not even analog, but more traditional things to teach, how much AI to teach, how to balance the two, and how to integrate these things. It's been very tricky. I have students that come in and they don't want to learn lighting because they can test it already on the computer instead of moving the equipment around like you had to in the past, right? That experience gave you the knowledge to now use the computer.
So I would say for me, the films that I love and inspire me are pre all of that. And so for me, like when I see something like that was shot on a green screen, or that like the actors were not in the same room when they recorded each take, I see it right away. And I mean, now that I'm a filmmaker, I know why. Whereas before, it was more this like uncanny feeling, like I don't believe in the story and so on. And so I think for me, like the way I see it is like at some point, maybe at some point, like AI and XR and simulation is good enough. But a lot of people will like stop at this level, and it's fine. But if you really want to go further and go more advanced, at some point you'll feel too constrained in something that you're doing, and you'll try to branch out in other categories and discipline. So for me, I started and everything on the computer, computer generated, because I was intimidated by talking with other people, and I wanted to create a film from scratch alone, and I had no money, so that was the easy way to do it. But as I got better at doing it, I became very frustrated and so on. So I started. So I went the opposite way. I started getting into old school, quote unquote, old school filmmaking, because your eyes become like more precise and more sharp, and I wanted like a specific look. Mm-hmm. So now I'm gonna try, the computer generated options and the practical version. So I think I would say. Let's not lose hope. Everyone has different visions and different needs. And for me, like, I know what I like and I know what I don't like. And so I think, like, what's important is that tools, whether they're technological or not, what's important is like they're ethical, that everyone is like compensated fairly, and so on, and allow to everyone their vision.
Can I add on to that really quick? So I went to Cal Arts for character animation back, I started in 2008, graduated 2012. So I went through the transition from paper animation into animating in a software that's called TV Paint. So, you know, I would get calluses between my fingers from flipping the papers, and I take like a lot of pride in that. And so by the end, instead of making my films on paper, I was like, well, I could do everything directly. I can draw everything straight onto a Cintiq, which is a monitor that has pen input. I could draw it straight into the computer into TV Paint. And I was like, okay, well, should we still be teaching students on paper? It's like, well, paper is still like, that's its own skill, but you can do the same job, maybe even better and way quicker by animating directly into TV Paint. And then I'm thinking about it, it's like, well, what about the principles of animation? You've got like the bouncing ball and like squash and stretch, all of these things. Now we've got motion graphics animators who could take like a circle and then they could stretch it and they could move it around with like puppet points and stuff. Now there's no more drawing involved. I mean, it's an additional skill set. It's a different style of doing it. And for that, it's like there's no like frame by frame animation. So really, I would say it's like, you know, if you're going to be posing things like lights and everything in Unreal or doing things digitally, that might be a valid place to start if it expedites for like learning and things. And I totally hear you on like, yeah, you want to get your hands dirty, you want to try things. There's going to be really important stuff. You are going to know what's important from this traditional method of like doing these things.
Yeah.
And that's the tradition that you have to carry forth. These are the things that you have to like understand. Like, does this translate into digital or not? Like, I'm sure that like in lighting and everything, there's like stuff that only happens in real life. So.
Yeah, I was just gonna say like, what I would say to the students is like learn both and then decide like when is the right time to use which technique. There's absolutely times where like just going as old school as possible is what your project calls for. There's going to be other times where like experimenting with the process is a better way to go about it. But the most useful thing that students and people learning could do is like develop your instincts, develop your taste, because that's what's really going to separate you as an artist going forward.
And I would say, so for instance, when I started, I was doing everything in Unity. And today, I would rather much spend a day on set than a day on Unity, but that's a personal preference. And so now I'm working with people who are doing the stuff in Unity that I used to do. And that comes from a personal preference. So over time, you know, as you get, you know, you are, you know, the more you try at the beginning of your career or at certain points, the more you can specialize into like what you like and what suits your vision better at some point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I work with companies and agencies in implementing those tools. So I share the mindset that it's a tool like in the creative and marketing departments. I would be really interested because I didn't hear and see that what your take is on stuff like Sora. If you go away from like Runway or Pika or stuff that you kind of, you know, it takes out the hassle. But if you go, you know, creating potentially a few years down the road, you got a couple of prompts and your vision is a ready-made video. How you see that?
I'm gonna, off the top of my head, these, like, my opinion, the way I see it right now, and I could be wrong, is that these things are trained on a hyper-specific style right now, as I mentioned earlier, like Wes Anderson, some visionary like that, with like visual visionary. You're not gonna be able to get that. Like, I've tried art directing in AI, and it was one of the most frustrating things I ever did. I was like, I can't get this thing to work. Like, I wanna like work with our 3D modeler and like make these things like actually happen. So there's like, I don't think it's going to take over everything. It can only do so much. It only knows what it knows, and it knows a lot, and it could do a lot within that. But it really is like only going to be able to give you certain things. Like, personally, I wouldn't use it like for filmmaking because it's not going to be able to do anything near what I have in my head. I've tried.
Yeah.
I think these tools are a bigger threat to like stock video and more generic marketing than they are to the art side of it. And like with what you're talking about with agency work, there's always this balance between the two, and it's kind of like. Like the way I kind of determine what tool sets I'm using and what approach I take is generally like, what's the budget for the project? If I can afford to do everything the old school way and like go like balls to the wall like that way, then I would rather do that. But I don't get that opportunity every single project. And so like in the end, I want the final thing to be the best thing possible. Because like most people, 90% of people who watch a film or watch an ad or something don't really care about how it's made. They care about what it is. And so, it's like if the like client is willing to pay for you to do all practical sets on real locations with like all that stuff, like that's great. And like most filmmakers would rather work that way.
Yeah.
But once again, it's like a very privileged few that get to do that and support their career for the entirety of their career that way.
I would say also when I see the video by Sora, I find them technologically impressive. I mean, we know that it's very early, but none of them really made me feel like, oh, I want that in one of my films. So there's the one ethical problem that I mentioned before is like we don't know on what kind of data. Like we don't know, we're not sure if if the data is like 100% ethical and if people are like being compensated for like reusing the likeness of their work. So I can see that tool being used for like B-roll or like VFX plates, so things that are like someone in the background. But I will tell you, as a director, it's always more fun to direct other artists than a machine. When I was trying to do prototypes with Midjourney for like concept arts of the Tentacle Girl, it's very frustrating when the machine doesn't understand what you want, because like with a human we have all of other ways to like explain and so on, and with the machine you don't know why they don't understand sometimes, and after a while it becomes like a little more lonelier. What I would say also about budgets, of course AI at some point will be a lot cheaper. You can also advocate for bigger budgets, or try at least. And that's something that I do in being like, okay, we can do this for X, but for X plus 10%, we can do that. And I think we can remember, we're way more in control than we think, and we can make suggestions and so on, and everything is a dialogue between the different stakeholders.
Cool.
I think that's.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
We'll be here all week.
15 minutes overtime. You guys are troopers. Thanks.